By 1995, there was at least 40 technology PR firms. And by 2000, there was at least 60 to 70 pure technology PR firm plays. And of course, the dot-com bust, which we'll come back to, was around 2002. And that had a big impact on, obviously, the tech PR firms, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Back to the early 80s, you started to see these big campaigns. So you saw the seeds of what Steve Jobs used to do, if you remember, with the blue jeans and the black turtlenecks and walking on the giant stage, and these it's like jets going over, and everything, leading all the way up to the smartphone in 2007. But these were extravaganzas, and these were PR, things where we made lots of money. I mean, the last one we did was only 4 or 5 years ago for Samsung launching their health wearable product, and I mean, these are $2 million launches. So it, it had its seeds back in the '80s, launching, the PCs, launching all this application software, etc. And I just followed the evolution, you know. And by 1992, the Weber Group was the largest PR firm in the world, and we had opened in Palo Alto and London, and we were servicing a variety of clients, introducing SAP around the world, SAS Institute. I had mentioned a few of these previously, but now, uh, to be fair to other people that were starting to open their own shops, there was a woman who had left Regis after helping launch the Macintosh, and her name was Andy Cunningham. And she and still is. I haven't talked to her in years, but she was a great competitor, and she was on the West Coast. So she was, if not in Palo Alto, no, it was where Apple is. Mountain View is where her shop was, and she eventually got bought, I think, by a British company as well. But she was great. She was very competitive, a great strategist, because there was also, just like other categories of PR, Shelley, which there's shops that are very ink oriented or very publicity oriented, and then there's shops that are very strategy based and more consultative in nature, which we were a mix, and Andy was a mix. Regis was a lot more strategy, and that's why he ultimately sold to Ernst and Young, but then bought himself back because he didn't like working with the consultants. So I thought you and your audience would be interested in knowing where how some of these places got bought or where they went, and and where they're going. Um, a few other names that I was writing down in the early '80s and all the way through to the early '90s, and today is still one of the largest now PR firms. I think they're around 100 million, and that's Wagner Edstrom. And they were one of the few, they and one called Pam Alexander, were the only two I recall that had major impact that weren't either in Silicon Valley or Cambridge, Massachusetts. And those were the two really hotbeds of technology PR, and WAGAD, as they're known, was actually in Portland, Oregon, of all places. But they had one big client, like I was mentioning before. A lot of these places had one. I had Lotus and Digital Equipment. It took me, and IBM for a while. And then they had, of course, Microsoft. And they also were one of the pioneers, and I give Pam Edstrom this award. She really was a pioneer in the CEO as rock star. And how do you manage and promote CEO as rock star? And of course, she had one in Bill Gates. And that gave her a lot of power with the media. Much like I mentioned before to you, like the entertainment PR people at the time, like Pat Kingsley, who would tell the Today Show, "You will not ask that question." Now we could have an ethical discussion about, you know, all of this, but Pam learned very quickly, and then we all copied that. So I wanted to make Mitch Kapoor buy more Hawaiian shirts, not less Hawaiian shirts. You know, I wanted Scott McNeely to actually bring his hockey stick, that it was his hobby, you know, to the press conference from Sun Microsystems, you know. And then you had characters, obviously, like Philippe Kahn, who had Borland, and he would give away dollar bills to everybody in the audience. You know, I mean, there was a bit of a carnivalesque kind of feeling in that 80s and 90s of the high tech PR, you know, sort of world. And again, WAGAD still exists to this day. I think Melissa is deeply interested in healthcare and medical technology as well. But hats off to her. I think she basically, I built the largest PR firm at the time in the world, but now she's got, of all the tech pioneers, she's remained independent and has the largest.